Welcome back, everyone, to the Brave Writer podcast. I don't know if you're like me, but I am chomping at the bit to hear, did Stevie get a special treat from UPS after he wrote a thank you note? Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Melissa, I mean, Melissa knows, but if you're listening and you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go to the last episode of the podcast where we talked extensively about the joy of writing thank you notes to companies and how they are so thrilled to hear from happy customers. Sometimes you get a treat in the mail. So Melissa, set the stage and tell us what happened.
So last week I shared how I had gotten contacted by someone at UPS's executive response team. Stephen had written a letter and it got passed up the chain in customer service to like the top. And they tracked me down through our address and gave me a call to say they would like to send him a treat because his letter was so meaningful. Oh my goodness. I was not expecting. I guess I was thinking they would probably send like some UPS swag.
Yes, like stickers or a hat.
Yes. No. They sent this tower of gourmet chocolates, like boxes, multiple boxes of hand-dipped, like chocolate-covered Rice Krispie treats and chocolate-covered marshmallows and chocolate-covered cookies, and then just chocolates. And the whole thing was it looked to me like this is what they send out to their, I don't know, VIP people at the holidays. It was all tied up with a UPS brown ribbon.
Oh my gosh. I mean, here's the thing, you guys. I'm just living my life. And suddenly Melissa is texting me these photos and my jaw was on the floor. Like, it is exquisite quality of swag. When we're talking chocolates, come on, that's the top of the chain already.
Right.
But they're like gorgeous.
Yeah, I've never seen. We have not. I don't shop where this was shopped at.
We are definitely going to put this photo on the blog post that goes with this episode. So if you want to read it see it in the show notes, you'll see it. But Melissa, tell us, what was Stevie's reaction? I know what mine was. What was his?
Stephen always has such like low-key, tickled, pleased responses. Like that was his response. He was so thrilled. He got especially happy when he found out it was marshmallow stuff, because the lovely Jeanette at the executive response team had asked me, like, what kind of treats does he like? I thought she was going to put something in, like with the UPS swag.
Right.
And I said, well, he loves marshmallows. So that's why it was all this. And like, she really picked out what would be especially. He was thrilled. He was so excited to share it with all the siblings. There was a lot of discussion about what to save for the two who do not live at home.
That's adorable.
And Julie, I've been thinking about this ever since, obviously, because there's so much chocolate in my house. When this woman emailed me, so she called me and then she followed up with an email. She got my address on the call and she followed up. So when it arrived, I sent her a note to let her know it had arrived and we were blown away. And Stephen was so excited and that she would probably be getting a thank you note in the mail because he's Stephen.
Right.
But it wasn't until that point in this reply that I noticed the subject title of that email that she had originally sent me. It looked like she had to open like a help ticket, a customer service ticket. It had a big reference number. And then after the reference number were the words customer complaint response.
Wow.
And it hit me like appreciation letters are so rare that UPS doesn't even have a mechanism in their system for creating a response to a customer that doesn't have the word complaint auto-coded in.
That is really remarkable. I mean, really, let's think about that. That customer service is choosing a job where all day, every day, you're fielding complaints. And, that's tiring. That is tiring. And so can you imagine the ray of sunshine, this handwritten letter that is itemizing the high quality skill of the UPS service, what that would feel like to read when all day you're just listening to people be mean and unhappy.
When I saw that subject title, it really made sense to me why Stephen's letter got passed all the way up the chain.
Yes.
And why they responded the way that they did. It really means something to express appreciation.
You know what that's reminding me of in kind of a strange, timely way is right now the Dodgers are in the World Series, the Los Angeles Dodgers against the Toronto Blue Jays. And two of the top players on the Dodgers team are Japanese from Japan, not Japanese American, but Japanese. And they are known for cleaning up the dugout after the game,
Interesting.
for filling cups of water from the huge water cooler and leaving them on top so people can just grab one. And it's getting a lot of attention because these are huge stars. In some of the comments, I see people say things like, you guys don't need to do that. They have people for that. But what these two players are demonstrating is that there is power in the humility of service, particularly when you are a star, particularly when you have notoriety. And one of the things that this whole story with Stephen reminds me of is that power of being a genuine person who imagines real people
Yes.
on the other side of their actions. We're not talking to machines. We're not just standing next to superstars. Everybody has human needs, human connection needs. And we have the opportunity to teach our children how important it is to believe that and to serve it in some kind of manifest way. Really incredible.
I love that you tied it to that. It's funny. I was thinking so much about, I didn't tell you I was going to take it here, but I was thinking how much there is in common with these appreciation letters that Stephen likes to write and the way Brave Writer writing classes respond to kids.
Wow.
And last week we talked about Charlotte Mason, and I was thinking about how one of the biggest gifts that Charlotte Mason gave me as a young mom was she wrote a lot about habit training, she called it, right? I don't love the word training, but I get it. It's like coach, athletes train. And I always say, like, I was into habits before habits were cool because of my 19th century hero, Charlotte, who was writing about habits. And one of her things that she talks about over and over again and how to approach parenting, this resonated so deeply. It's how I have raised my children, is not to focus on what they're doing wrong, but to focus on what they're doing right, or what is behavior that you like to see. And if there's a behavior that you don't love, then instead of criticizing it, think about, oh, what would I love?
Yes.
What would be a pleasing behavior? And then game it out. Practice it. Practicing that behavior. Practicing that habit. I think modern habit science has gone that direction. But when I think about how Brave Writer approaches writing, it's not about what many of us experienced as young writers, where somebody marks it up with all the things you did wrong.
That's right. In fact, I love that you just said this in connection with habits and even the idea of training. One of the topics I wanted to talk about today is perspective, because perspective helps you be an effective learner and it helps you to be an empathetic and connecting person. And so when we're thinking about perspective here, we're thinking about ideas like showing appreciation. How do you show appreciation? Why would you show appreciation? Because you are able to imagine that there is a human being on the other side of that task that would enjoy feeling valued, feeling appreciated. You only write that letter if you actually believe a human being of worth is on the other side of that stamped envelope. When we're talking about writing coaching, we are recognizing that there is a human being with a vulnerable and fragile ego risking self-disclosure, and we are honoring that self-disclosure with kindness. When we think about being a star athlete on a major league baseball team, those players are thinking, actually, my fellow teammates need to know that I'm on their team. I'm not just here to show off for a big audience. And these habits can be coached, but they also really need to be modeled.
Yes, yes. And two of my thoughts are, first of all, it's extremely energizing to receive that positive feedback.
It is.
Whether it's Jeanette at UPS's customer service team or one of our kids getting, I really loved the way that you did this in this piece of writing, or this really struck me, or wow, that image is going to stick with me. That's energizing. That creates enthusiasm. It's the whole, I mean, if you want, take it to neuroscience, it's like that dopamine reward system. Your brain
That's
wants
right.
more of that. You're more willing to take risks and do more writing. And then the corollary is that also, once that dynamic exists, you're more open to the constructive feedback and you know what, like I actually didn't understand what's happening in this piece. Could you tell me more?
In my book, The Brave Learner, I talk about the second force of enchantment, and it is called mystery. And one of the ways that I talk about mystery is helping kids demystify, right? So if something is mysterious, we want to understand it a little bit more intimately, right? So if it's a treasure hunt, we're trying to find the clue that gets us to the next clue and takes us eventually to the treasure. If we are seeing something blowing in the wind, we might be curious about how the wind causes that effect. So one of the ways that we can grow this empathetic connection is to give ourselves other ways of seeing than the standard way we always see. One of the reasons we did last week's episode about these appreciation notes is that it really is encouraging kids to get outside their own needs and to imagine complimenting someone for doing a good job, doing something that they benefited from, and actually giving that lovely approbation to that other person. One of the ways that we can grow this perspective taking, recognizing that the way you see is not the only way to see, is to change the lens. So this is how we can start with the physical act of perspective, and then eventually we can apply this to a more abstract level of perspective taking. But inside my book, I talk about introducing binoculars, a microscope, a magnifying glass, even a jeweler's loupe. We ordered this little fishing tackle box of rocks from an old homeschool company that doesn't exist anymore. And it came with this little spiral bound set of activities that you could do with metamorphic rocks or, igneous rocks or sedimentary. And inside this tackle box were all the rocks you were going to explore with numbers on them that correlated with this little guide and a jeweler's loupe. And I am telling you, no one was interested in rocks until that tackle box arrived, and each rock was in its own little container, and there was a jeweler's loupe to get your eye nice and close and see all the sparkles in the crystal and see the differentiation between the granite colors. There is something about changing how you see that means you see more. And that's all perspective taking is. It is changing how you see so you can see more, see the things you couldn't see before, or to overturn the assumption you had. You might think, oh, the sparkle is coming from the white part of the crystal. And when you get close, it's actually reflecting off the black. Those are amazing moments. And they all go to this idea of getting out of your assumptions and starting to see a much wider vision of the world around you.
Yes. When I'm writing a child character, especially a young child, I get down on the floor and try to, because here I am in my adult body looking at things like a tree, say, and I'm seeing it from my height. Changing my viewpoint helps me notice things that I might have forgotten, what it's like to look at that tree when you're 4 feet tall or 3 feet tall.
Gosh, that's such a great example. I really love that because I think so often, even our memories of ourselves as children are just a shadow of what was the full experience at the time. So if we're taking this further, and we're going to study something like, our pet dog actually crawling around on all fours, trying to drink water with just your tongue,
Yes.
eating with your face out of a bowl is a way to increase perspective. It's not identical. We're not saying crawling around on all fours feels the same as it does for a dog, but it helps a child develop the capacity to imagine that the world is quite different when you're down at that level and you're moving with 4 parts of your body and not just 2 with available hands.
Hey everyone, it's Blake Bowles here, the director of Unschooled Ventures, the travel company for homeschooled, unschooled, and self-directed teenagers. We have a new trip going to Valencia, Spain in February 2026, and there's just a few spots left for ages 15 to 19. This trip is about Spanish language learning and, more broadly, learning how to learn anything that's important to you when you go back home. It's also about wandering around Valencia and eating good food and soaking up the sunshine with cool teenagers from all across North America. It's a high autonomy experience. You even get to fly to and from Spain by yourself. If you know a teenager who's interested in this adventure, encourage them to go to unschooladventures.com to check out what we have to offer. And if you want to get to know me a bit more, go find my interview on the Brave Writer podcast way back in December 2021. Thanks.
A couple of other activities that I think are great ways of developing this different perspective skills for kids is one, round robin storytelling, where you start and then I tell a little and we take turns going back and forth, because I'm always going to be surprised by the twist that you take that isn't what I was anticipating in my head. It's improv, really. It's that shows me that, oh, wow, my assumptions about what comes next or what makes sense isn't the same as everybody else's assumptions. You can do that with drawing, too. When Rilla was younger, this was one of her favorite games to play with me. Like, one of us would just sort of draw a squiggle, and then the next person would draw something, and gradually you're drawing a picture, and it's not at all what either one of you might have guessed it would turn out to be in the end.
Gosh, that's a marvelous activity. I'm going to try that with my granddaughter. I have never done that. I've done it with writing. I've done it with oral storytelling, but never with drawing. That's amazing, Melissa.
It's so fun.
It sounds so fun.
And this is great, I think, for sort of those middle-aged kids. You know what I mean? Is fan fiction.
Yes.
I'm a fan of fanfic for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that when you're writing fiction, you quickly learn that you have to imagine the point of view of every character, even the bad guys. Otherwise, they're flat characters. They have no depth to them. So you have to figure out, but what's their argument for it? Why are they saying they're doing what they're doing? And fanfic is a kind of a safe way to do that, where you have a lot of scaffolding in place already. You know the world. You don't have to do all of the world building from scratch. And you pick a character. And so sometimes it can be even a challenge, if you were telling this story from, I don't know, Voldemort's perspective, or Wicked is a great example. Wicked is a perfect example. Gregory Maguire, when he wrote the book, just imagine, wait, what is the story like from the Wicked Witch of the West's point of view?
That's exactly right. And in fact, those are the ways that you do move from this sort of physical act of shifting perspective, using a magnifying glass to look closely at a painting on a wall or a ladybug on a leaf, a microscope to see skin cells or what your hair looks like when it's all the way micro, very close up, a telescope to make the moon and the stars seem closer than they actually are. These are ways of shifting perspective instantly. Your body is doing it for you. 3D glasses for a 3D movie, these are all really wonderful. as you get older, you can shift into perspective taking through literature, fabulous way. That's why we have such great books at the Dart and Arrow level and the Boomerang. Melissa, one of our writers. But those are ways we enter the story through the protagonist, but we are also exposed to the ancillary characters and how their story contributes to the overarching narrative. To imagine from the villain's perspective is a whole other level. We talked about this a little bit in one of my webinars for kids recently when we were talking about writing a fairy tale from the villain's perspective. John Sheska wrote the famous True Story of the Three Little Pigs by A. Wolf, right? And he goes through and makes his case for why everything you thought you knew about the Three Little Pigs isn't accurate. One of the funny things I did, Melissa, is I was checking in with our staff about that book. And there are a bunch of people on our team who are younger, and they all said that they thought that book was the true story when they were kids.
Because that was their introduction.
It was in a book.
Yeah.
Like, of course it has to be it's called The True Story.
Holy cow.
I'm reading a book. The mother is laughing, reading it aloud, knowing it's satire. And the child is like, this must be true. And here's why that's so fascinating. It takes some skill to pick up satire and sarcasm.
Right.
It takes familiarity with perspective taking to be able to identify when somebody is literally misusing the truth to push an agenda. And of course, in this day of, social media algorithms and everything else, sometimes the truth and satire are pretty indistinguishable for a lot of us, right? We're trapped. So part of the point of perspective taking is to at least provoke the question, like, on what basis is this person, character, institution making that assertion? How reliable is it? How would I know if it was reliable? Those are great questions.
Gosh, that's a great story. Wow.
Isn't that funny? I was so shocked by it. I so did not expect to hear that any child. I went back to my son, Noah. I'm like, did you think this was the true story? Like,
it's mind-blowing. I love that. What an exercise in a perspective I could not have imagined.
Yes, exactly.
I love books where the main character is, say, an animal, because that also does that sort of
Oh, yeah.
How does the animal experience these things in the adult world? Like if you read Watership Down.
Oh, wow.
And there's a word in the book that the rabbits have for when animals freeze when they see the headlights of an oncoming train or car. It's tharn. You go tharn. We use that word in my family all the time.
I love that.
And it's not something that, I needed a word for before I read Watership Down. And then as soon as this word entered my lexicon, I think of examples where it applies all the time.
I'm like mind blown right now. That is such a perfect example of what we're talking about. And I remember reading Watership Down. I was like a freshman or sophomore in high school. And I was so taken with the story. It was clear to me that there was a metaphor happening, but I couldn't quite place it yet. I was a little inexperienced in history, and I knew it had political overtones, but the story itself was so compelling, even apart from that. And one of the things that I find probably the most interesting about literature is those different layers. Like the story can work on its own merits,
right?
But it can also speak into a culture, into a historic event, into a popular kind of dilemma or dialogue happening in the zeitgeist. And that book just does that on so many levels. I forgot about that word tharn. That's so good.
I love that book. I also am thinking of the book called Dog's Body by Diana Wynne Jones. It's a middle grade fantasy novel. That's one of my favorites. It's maybe my favorite of her books. And there's this star, it's Sirius, the dog star. And so all of the stars are like these sentient beings, and he's being punished for something. And the punishment is that he's sent to Earth as a puppy.
Oh,
so you have this kind of cosmic being with all these vast powers, but he can't use them. And when I think of that book, the passage that is so vivid in my mind is when he's experiencing smell as a
Oh.
puppy, and the like layers upon layers of all these fascinating, delicious, intoxicating smells. And it makes you think, wow, there's this whole world around me that I'm not experiencing because I can't smell all of that.
That's powerful, right? To be introduced to limits that you don't have in a meaningful way. We have a book that we wrote a boomerang for that's called Disability Visibility. Do you remember that book? It's a collection of essays. And that's literally what that book did for me when I was reading it. I felt like I was being introduced to a firsthand experience of disability. Instead of reading about it, I was like entering into it through my imagination. But I feel like that's one of the things when we're talking about perspective taking in particular, what we're saying is to start with the assumption that you don't know, that there's a lot to learn, that there are things you don't know.
Right.
Ask those curious questions. And this kind of leads me to another thing I wanted to talk about today. When we're introducing a subject for our kids to learn about, we're actually asking them to adopt the perspective that this is important for them to learn before they have that perspective. And then we're kind of annoyed. We're like, look, I said math was important. Why aren't you on board? Or look, we have to study history. Why don't you want to? We have not done the work of getting behind the eyes of the child and understanding what it takes to ignite interest. And yet, if we do that, we will actually create the foundation that will make them interested in the subject. So talk with me a little bit, Melissa, about this idea of why a child isn't naturally interested in the school subjects, and then what are things we can do to see it through their eyes, through their perspective, and give them the tools to actually develop interest.
Okay. I love this topic. This is a real sweet spot for me. I think about it in these two tracks. One is there's content, there's information that we think is important for kids to know. And then there's skills that we think are important for them to have. And often, as school subjects, the content and the skills are smushed together. And you're supposed to care about the information while also doing the hard work of learning the skills that go along with the information. We, as homeschoolers, we have, first of all, the ability to separate those things out as often as we want. If I think, oh, I would like you to learn about, I don't know, magnetism, right? Well, there's lots of ways just through encounter, just through accidental encounter. I mean, accidental, I'm having air quotes because I, as the mom, have the ability to create those accidents.
Yes. We call that strewing.
Yes. So that's one approach we can take is how can I create the conditions that would allow for an encounter with this that might grip their interest, and then I can offer more. So we can like focus on that piece of it first. That's sort of the content. Like, here's the knowledge that I think is important knowledge. Grown-ups have decided people should know this.
I mean, this is what I love. I love realizing that we give our kids almost no warm-up. Like when we want them to learn how to tie their shoes, we'll put colorful shoelaces in the shoe. We'll give them something to practice with. We'll help them tie, give them a chance, then we'll tie, then we'll come back, right?
Are you telling me that like when your babies were learning to walk, you didn't make them do the worksheets first?
There was no lecture preceding walking. There was not. But it's true though. Like if our kids see something enough, like a bike being ridden by another kid, then they're willing to risk skinning their knees to learn to ride a bike, right? That's what's interesting. Like they'll even see a sibling crash, hit their head, no helmet, whatever. They want to get back on that bike. There is something that has enticed them to care about mastering this kind of risky skill. And so when we're thinking about the perspective of a child, and that's, I've written a whole book on it, right? Melissa just did a fantastic episode on title schooling. Look that one up. What we're saying is a child has to have a vision for why it matters to them. It is not enough that it matters to you. What you're saying in that transaction, if you say it matters to me, therefore it should matter to you, what you're actually saying is, I don't want to go through the work of taking your perspective. I need you to automatically adopt mine. But of the two people, who's got maturity on their side and experience and wisdom? You do. So it is incumbent on you as the grown-up to think through what it might be like behind the eyes of the child. And honestly, Melissa, you spontaneously gave us one of the most beautiful images for that process. So you want to understand what a tree looks like to a child? Get down to 2 feet tall, right? You want to understand what it feels like to handwrite when you don't know how? Try doing copy work with your non-dominant hand.
Yes.
You want to understand how to do math and learn addition or multiplication? Do it with base 8 instead of base 10. Make it hard for yourself again. Understand how much challenge is behind these skills you already take for granted.
I'm going through this right now myself, reading the bass clef for my cello lessons.
Totally.
I learned to read the treble clef from singing, right?
Yep.
From years and years and years in choirs and in musicals. But I am still, and I've been taking cello lessons now for, almost a year. Not quite. I'm still struggling. I'm translating still. I am not a fluent reader. I have to great big dogs fight animals it over and over. And okay, my cello teacher, who, by the way, I think we should totally interview on this podcast because she was a teenage unschooler.
Oh, we definitely need to have her on. That sounds amazing.
She read the Teenage Liberation Handbook her first year of high school, and she's like, Mom, Dad, this is for me. She went to the first ever not back to school camp. So she's got stories, but also she primarily teaches adult beginners to play cello.
Wow.
Adult beginners. And so the process of being an adult beginner and really struggling with both the physical skills and with reading. Me struggling with reading, that's new territory.
Sure is. It's funny that you brought that up because I learned piano and you have to learn the bass clef and treble together.
Mm-hmm.
So I always just assumed everybody had no problem with that. And then I remember my ex-husband who played the saxophone had no clue about the bass clef. He was like, what is up with this thing down here? Right? And it had never occurred to me. And I think it's so interesting that you selected that as the example. All we have to do to approximate what our kids are going through when we ask them to learn a new skill is to give ourselves a challenge. Study another language, learn how to write using a different orthography. Give yourself a challenge of being a beginner. They call that in Zen Buddhism a shoshin, beginner's mind. That's what you're actually needing to lead your children. So the perspective shift is for you to have beginner's mind, not for your child to adopt the adult perspective about the importance of school.
Right. Me figuring out how hard it is where all the notes are shifted down one line or one space and making my brain translate that while I'm also struggling with physical. I mean, it's such a perfect example of reading and writing and spelling, all of those skills, because I've got my left hand doing stuff. I've got my right hand doing stuff. I've got my elbows going this way and my shoulders going that way. And my hair is in the problem. Like, oh no, like I'm fingering on top of my hair because I forgot. Like it's such a 7-year-old at the table struggling with copy work.
Gosh, it sure is. And so if we're going to lay a foundation for some of these skills, one of the challenges I'd like to put to you, if you're listening, is to just pick the one that you really think matters that your kid hates. And I want you to find a way to be a beginner. Now, I gave you a couple of ideas, but give yourself that challenge. What does beginning look like for you? Is it non-dominant hand? Is it doing a harder version of it? Is it doing a different version of it? One of the things that I learned very early when I was teaching my kids math is that my own math skills were really bad. And so I started doing research into how do you teach math or learn math if you didn't have a good experience when you were young. And that's how I stumbled into the world of math manipulatives.
Mm.
And for me, when I got my first round of math books for my kids, I picked Mequon Math. It's still available. It exists on Amazon. I'll get you a link in the show notes. These are very inexpensive math books. They're on newsprint. They're not heavy duty textbooks, but I did the first two on my own. I had to reorient my brain to another way of understanding math so I would value it enough to like it enough to teach it. Because here's what I know. The subjects you find the most difficult are the ones you insist on the hardest. You don't find the magic in the subjects you don't like as easily. You're more like, we're going to grit our teeth and force our way through this material, and I'm going to drag you behind me because you just want to get it done because you don't love it.
Right.
So I had to teach myself to experience some pleasure in math before I could even approach it with my children. And I actually fell in love with the manipulatives. What's really funny is Noah was like, do I have to keep using these? I get it already. I'm like, you have to, because I can't imagine that you've gotten it. I mean, I'm 35 years old and I'm just starting to get it, right?
I love that, Julie. Oh, that's so good. I think also letting our kids see us in the struggle is so good for them. I just happened to watch a video about this YouTuber. He's a gamer. So this is a middle-aged guy, and he said, "My wife is not a gamer."
Okay.
But I gave her Minecraft, and I didn't give her any information about Minecraft and just want, to see if she could figure it out. And it was so instructive for him to watch her trying to understand. And since Minecraft is a sandbox game where there aren't clear objectives,
yes,
it's kind of get in there and, try and stay alive, but do whatever you want to do. She kept getting frustrated and over and over because she's like, what am I supposed to do?
Oh.
What does the game want me to do? And he said it made him see Minecraft from a whole different side. It changed his perspective on a couple of core gameplay features.
Wow.
And some serious gamer stance about, survival Minecraft versus creative mode. He changed his perspective on these things from watching her really have no idea what she was doing, floundering around in this world. I think both of those sides of it.
I love that.
Being the struggler or being the one understanding the struggle differently.
When I wrote Help, My Kid Hates Writing, I wondered if people who were familiar with my work would feel like it was too familiar, that perhaps it wouldn't have the same impact as it would for people who didn't know anything about Brave Writer. But what I found out by reading the reviews is that even Brave Writer fans, even parents with kids who love writing, found new strategies and ideas within my book to help them be successful writing coaches. Here are some of the feedback that I've received, some of the reviews that I wanted to share with you. One reviewer said, another gem of a book by Julie. She always feels like an ally, not only for the home educators, but for the kiddos. This book has solid strategies to help soften the writing experience for kids with the guidance of parents who themselves may need a mental makeover in what writing even is or can be. Another reviewer said to me, I can't say enough about how wonderful this book is. It's well written, which is good for this type of book, but it's also so useful. It makes it fun to write. And then maybe my favorite review said this book was heartfelt, insightful, actionable, and exactly what we needed. Julie challenges you to think in new ways and encourages you to be the guide your child needs on their language arts journey. Honestly, that was the motivation to write this book. I want you to feel that you can give your children the soft landing pad they deserve as they flex their wings of self-expression. I show you how, I give you great tips and strategies and lots of narrative examples. Check out my new book, Help My Kid Hates Writing. Go to juliebogartwriter.com or any place books are sold. Well, part of what you're saying is there's an exploration part of this, not just getting through and getting done, checking the box, completing the work, but there's a willingness to waste time. And wasting time and resources is all a part of learning. When you said that, you made me think of a woman that I met through Brave Writer who years ago had a child who wanted to grow up to be a cook. She was like 8. She had watched her mom do all this cooking, but she hated the idea of using a recipe, partly because her own reading skills were kind of struggling, but she also really wanted to cook. So the mom said, okay. So this kid just started making up stuff. She tried to bake cookies, had no recipe, throwing butter, eggs, flour in different ratios, failing over and over, taught herself to build a recipe for cookies by making dozens of them incorrectly with no recipe. Who has the patience for that? Who is willing to mess up the kitchen, throw away ingredients, waste time, skip the shortcut? And yet this child, oh my gosh, the amount of stuff she learned about baking by just guessing. Like, I look back on that, I had forgotten about it till you just told that story. But this was somebody who was actually engaged in the process of learning to bake, not follow a recipe. Those are two different things. And I think we get stuck imagining that we have to get through a certain amount of math instead of what would it look like to just try all different things. I've told this story before, but when my son was in 7th grade, he got bored with the math books and he created a base 12 times table, which means you have to add 2 new symbols for the, like, after you get, you have 0 through 9. Now you've got to have like another squiggle for whatever that's called and another squiggle still for whatever that's called, right? For this base 12. And so what you ended up with is you're multiplying, carrying through a squiggle that doesn't have meaning to you, but that actually does have numeric value. And he spent a month building it and then kept it in his wallet for like years because he was so proud of it. That taught him more about the way math works than any quiz proving that he had mastered his math facts. Sometimes our kids don't have a big enough challenge that forces them to think deeply about the subject that we want them to know.
I love both of those stories. That cookie story is remarkable.
It is.
Because that took something on both the parent's part and the child's part. The parent had to have that openness, not pinning any kind of weight on outcomes.
True.
And understanding that creation is messy.
Yes.
That experimentation is messy. Science moves forward through failures and mistakes.
True.
So I think it asks a lot. Like, a parent has to develop those skills or really work on, I'm going to detach from the ladder of propriety and outcome-based objectives that are so deeply encoded into my experience of the world.
100%.
And then the kid, like, not getting upset by the...
Well, and maybe she did, like, I wasn't there, so I don't know where the frustration level was. I don't know what level the parent helped or supported. Maybe she said, try baking powder next time. Maybe she said, add an egg. I don't know. But what I want to point out is that they were willing to waste time and money on resources to experiment with an objective the child valued. And that's really the key here. They can't value an objective if the process itself feels too high stakes or uninteresting. Both of those are impediments to learning. We do not want the stakes to be so low that they're bored, but we also don't want them to be so high that they're unmotivated. We want to give them a meaningful sandbox of exploration, right? And, for math, that could be a board game or a card game, but it could also be quilting. It could also be baking, and it could have some of this freedom to take risks, to see what happens when, as opposed to did they follow the steps correctly? Those are two very different approaches to a subject.
That's right. And one of the big perspective shifts is that you start to understand, instead of this failed outcome being wasted time, it's productive time because I learned something.
Yes.
And that's what time is for.
Yes. And, wasted time in the American productivity ethic means that you could have been contributing to the GDP, right? Like the gross domestic product. Like, don't waste my time. You could have been making more ketchup. You could have assembled another Ford. Like, that's where it comes from. But that's not what you're in. You're literally, all you have is time.
Right.
When parents say to me, we don't have time, I'm like, all you have is time. That is all you have. You're choosing to allocate it. So what if you allocate a half day, an hour, a day to nothingness, to wandering around, to experimenting with cookies, to setting up the dominoes and seeing if you can knock them over? I remember we spent a whole afternoon trying to make parachutes for our little G.I. Joe men to see which ones could fly off the upper balcony of our condo and actually float down, not just fall. Right? We spent a half a day doing that. It was magically fun. We could call it physics. We didn't learn anything about physics except through observation. We had no mathematical formula to go with it. We were just observing, well, how big does that thing need to be? How long do the strings need to be? How well are they attached to our little plastic men? How much of a breeze makes a difference? Like, those were the questions we were answering. I didn't create a big record. We just experienced it.
Right.
These are lessons that you cannot account for except in this one way. You have taught your children that it is worthwhile to ask a lot of questions and experiment with a lot of answers. And by the way, that's the skill they're getting that will carry them through life.
Through everything that they try. Every time I sit down to quote, practice my cello, I have a moment where I have to change that language. I remember what John Holt, the great alternative education pioneer, said. He said, no, it's not practicing. It's playing. I'm playing piano. I'm playing cello.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
And when I enter into it, now I love the word practice in the context of my creative practice. It means something really special to me in that way. But when I think of it, like, I will literally feel my body change. The difference between, I should practice cello today, to I'm going to play cello for a while.
I immediately thought of my youngest daughter. She took voice lessons and piano one year and did not want to do the recitals.
I had one of those too. Yes.
I was like, what is the point then? Why are we doing this? And she's like, you mean pleasure isn't enough? I like singing. I like playing the piano. I don't like performing. That was such a shock to me. Talk about a perspective shift. I didn't realize that I had been raised on performance as the only reasonable reason to spend money on studying an instrument.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that it was just for pleasure.
I had to have that argument with the head of the music school that my kids took piano lessons at, because my second oldest, she loved to play. She was the kid who would walk in the door, drop everything, go straight to the piano, but she hated the recitals.
Wow.
And I had to explain to the head, look, you're a performer. I too am a performer. I can't imagine not wanting to take the opportunity to get up in front of the crowd. But that's not this kid. And isn't it amazing that she loves to play just for the joy of playing music?
I mean, how incredible. And what if we looked at all the subjects that way? That we were actually fostering pleasure, not mastery. What a complete switch in how we might approach handwriting. If handwriting is painful, Our job is to make it pleasurable, not to insist it be done for the sake of showing they have self-discipline.
Yes. And that brings me back to the whole content versus skill
Yes.
place I began with when you asked this question, because, okay, so that's a skill, handwriting. What kind of content makes it more fun? How about compiling a notebook of information about your favorite game or your favorite sport or your lifelong bird list?
Yes, or writing knock-knock jokes or copying
Yes.
the lyrics from your favorite song, right? Like there are lots of ways, but we can only get there if we start with that shift in perspective, that we are looking at the world through the eyes of a child. That's where we begin. And here's the last piece on this wasted time idea that I want to say. You, as a parent, need to waste time thinking about this.
Yes.
It would be better for your child not to do copy work for 2 months while you think about how to make it interesting than to drag that child across the finish line every day, building a habit of hating copy work. That's what's happening. So do not do that. This is Julie, Grandma Julie. And here's what I'm saying. You can take the time you need. You can do what I did with math. Find out what there is to value about math if you've never valued it, and get that working in your own vocabulary and activity before you start introducing it to your kids. You can even say to your kids, yeah, we're not doing copy work. You hate it, and I haven't figured out how to make it interesting. I'll let you know when I have, and take the time.
And they will appreciate that.
They will. They may even come back to you and say, well, here's what I think would make it interesting. Some children are so darling that way. If you just open the door a crack and say, hey, I hate that you hate this. I'm going to think about how to make it less painful. They'll be like, well, here's what you can do. Give me a bowl of
Right.
M&Ms and I'm on
Right.
board, right? Like,
Exactly. Snacks, I'm there.
that goes back to your well-regarded chew, suck, swallow, whatever connection.
Yes, suck, swallow, breathe synchrony.
Oh, this is a great episode. Oh my gosh. Oh, Melissa, every week is a joy. You know, I should be reading them, but I've been getting so many lovely messages from you all through Instagram. People telling me they never miss a week. It's changing their lives to listen to us. I just got to tell you, that's why we keep going. It is a real pleasure at this stage in our lives to be able to reflect on, decades
Right.
of research and application into what it means to learn and what it means to care about the emotional lives of children. So thanks for listening.
Right. And you know what? It is so gratifying and it's instructive to me because I come away from every conversation with you, Julie, so energized.
Same.
Because that's the feeling of recognizing how much you know and that you have ideas of value. And that's what we want to give to our kids.
Oh my gosh, so true. I'm going to close with this because I think it's so funny that you just said that. One of the top recordings on my computer that comes up whenever I open iTunes is a little recording called Interesting Conversations with Jacob and Katrin. And back when I first started my podcast, they were so enamored that they used a digital recorder to create their own podcast. And they talked about Harry Potter and they talked about things they valued. And, that is a trick for narration, by the way. Give your kid a mic and you will find out all the things they know a lot about. You could say, hey, tell me everything you know about math, and hand them a microphone and you would learn what they know.
Oh, amen to that. I don't like cooking. And so in order to cook, I have to pretend I'm on the Food Network doing a show.
That is the best hack I've ever heard of. Oh my gosh, I love that. That is spectacular. I love that. Well, Melissa, we are at the end of this episode. All the things we mentioned, including Mequon Math and links to other things, will be in the blog and show notes, and a photograph of the wonderful chocolate marshmallow haul that Stephen received from UPS. You can check that out on the blog. Until next time, thank you so much for listening, reviewing, liking, and sharing this podcast. It means the world to us, helps keep us on the air. Have a great week, Melissa.
You too, Julie. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Okay, that's another Brave Writer episode in the books. Thanks for joining Melissa and me today. We love it when you leave us reviews, when you send us comments via text message. We read them all. We also couldn't do this show without our fabulous production team at Nova or Jeanette Hall, the Brave Writer team member who handles all those administrative details you know nothing about. In the meantime, we hope that you have a fantastic week. Keep going, think well. We're rooting for you.